This is the Final Word Cricket Podcast, Season 17, Episode 27.
Yep.
Adam Collins with you on a beautiful spring morning in London. And I'm talking down the line to Geoff, who is still in Melbourne. Our program is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. We'll tell you a lot more about them in the middle of the show. Lots to get through. We'll run through all of that in a moment. But first, hello to you.
Hello to you. It is night time. I don't believe it's a beautiful day in London because all I can see is the inside of your house, which looks the same as it does on the days when it's freezing, except that you're not wearing a big felt jacket and a newsboy's cap, like you're trying to sell copies of, I don't know, the Evening Standard or something on the corner of a street in about 1910.
This is this constant tension between Rach and me about when the heating should or shouldn't be on. It's such a cliche.
No. That's the ultimate point of conflict, is what temperature is too cold.
Yeah, and as the Antipodean, of course, I want it on more often. And Rach is like, you're a fucking softcock, although she wouldn't use that formulation necessarily, but that's very strongly
I feel it's
what
unlikely.
She's
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, like you get a sense looking at my backdrop. You know, I always sit in the same spot in my little annex here, office of sorts, but around me is like the real sign the cricket season is coming. On one side of the room is all our work shit, which I haven't unpacked after our trip to, I don't even remember anymore.
Sri Lanka?
The last time I had all my work shit out. That's all on this side. Underneath it, there's a couple of baggy cricket caps. On the right-hand side, I've got a couple of oval Dream Boys jumpers, including one that says Felix on it because I neglected to deliver his last season. I've got Aaron Haranath, one of his cricket jumpers, the former Surrey player. I owe him to return that at some stage. A pair of spikes, a Kodak, one of our favourite, Geoff, which we've promoted before, the VAR.
Tie line.
The tie line VAR. I've got one of them to my right, sprawled across the floor as well. I've got my big radio mixer, which hasn't been put away since Sri Lanka. So, and the ODB scorebook, just for good measure. So very ADHD energy. I will get to it soon. I desperately need to clean this up before we get to the Aussie summer. Or Aussie summer? English summer.
Aussie summer? English summer comes before that in the season of ours, the final word season that'll end around the end of March. You're off tonight, if I'm not mistaken, England time, to do your Lord's Taverners bit with David Gower. You're going to sit on stage and have a chat with him, which is kind of part two of the interview that we took. We took so long talking to him over the first hour and a half that we only got about halfway through his career. I think we got to about 1989. We were about to start the 89 Ashes when we ran out of time. So are you picking up clean from the 89 Ashes? Are you going straight into Mark Taylor 219 like we were talking about on Storytime with Barrett last time around?
That's the plan. So I've kind of framed it that way with the Tavs and with the great man, David, that we'll pick up the conversation. I've only got about 30 minutes.
You're recording it?
Yeah, I'm going to put it on the feed. So the idea is I'll record us in the usual way, and it'll be filmed, I think, as well. So there'll be content, the hill of content.
The hill of content will continue to get higher. The Englishman who went up a hill of content and came down a mountain of content.
But yeah, so that's a thing tonight. But I've promised everyone who I'm dragging along. I say dragging along. People want to be there. It's 15 quid. It's going to be nice. That I'll have them clear by 8:45. And I think we're scheduled to go on stage at 8:10. So, it'll be nice. And the more important thing here, of course, is that it turbocharges our fundraising efforts for Edinburgh. As we said last week, I'm pretty sure the marathon, half marathon are full, but the 10K is not. And the 10K is the, let's call it the gateway drug to being part of our, final word running crew, which is a vibrant community of itself. It's a sort of a subgroup on WhatsApp, and lots of people who've never known each other before have met through that, become great mates, have raised money for the Taverners. 75th anniversary of the Lord's Taverners this year. Geoff, a segue from that. Gower and I managed to get us a Lord's game this year for the Taverners. And of course, I'm not around when it's going to be played because I'm in the Caribbean doing the Windies Australia Test Series. So there'll be a game on the nursery ground at some point when we're in the Caribbean between MCC and the Taverners. But yeah, that's all part of these celebrations. And we are proud to be in association with an organisation who raise money for people who have disability typically, but other people are disadvantaged, to have them involved in the game when they're young. And table cricket is a huge part of that, and that's what we'll be showcasing at Bounce tonight.
Yep, and all working towards the fundraising. Like I said, if you want to do the half marathon and it's closed, just do the 10K twice and then add on a little bit at the end. That's fine. That totally works. They won't know. Just lap all the way back around to the start. and then do it again, and you'll still finish before me.
Yeah, I went for a run yesterday because the weather was suitable, and I'm going to try and go for one later, work pending, later this afternoon. So we're in our groove. I hope you are as well, Geoff. Just doing a few 5K laps around, around, I don't know, doing the tan track twice or something like that might be your go.
Yeah, well, where I am, it's extremely hilly, so it's absolutely brutal in every direction. There is no easy way to go. So yeah, it just has to, like, doing 2Ks is horrible here. But you mentioned going to the Caribbean. We've got to talk about the Caribbean because Brian R. Kane is going to the Caribbean. To pronounce that for you, that's not arcane like the word. It is R full stop Kane, Caine, like Michael. If Michael's first name was Brian and Michael's middle name started with R. That's how it would work. He's an American professional cricket umpire, as he likes to say on his online hill of content. He's going to do a training course in the Caribbean. He's had to raise some money for it because the organisation that looks after umpires in America doesn't look after umpires in America very well. The US Cricket Administration not going so well these last couple of weeks, if you've seen some of the extremely troubling reporting from Peter Della Penna coming out of their tour as well, where all kinds of dubious things have been going on. But Brian's got to get himself to this umpiring camp, so he's been doing a little fundraiser as well to try to get him help defray the costs of getting over there.
Yeah, and look, he's nearly there anyway. It's only 1,500 bucks, sorry, it's USD, so it's not like he's trying to raise shitloads of money, but it's more an emblem of, like, as you say, Geoff, that they're not well supported over there. And we feel so invested in the Brian story about hopefully becoming an international umpire. He's done so much work in recent years to get where he's gotten to, umpiring in a lot of the United States T20 comps and that type of thing. So this is the next step in his umpiring development, doing a lot of work in the Caribbean. So you'll be able to find that link on his prolific TikTok or Instagram. We're very proud of Brian and what he's achieved, so that's pretty cool. By the way, Michael Caine's name is really Maurice Joseph Micklewhite. So he changed it up to Michael Caine or Sir Michael Caine. Still going at 91. So he was born in the March of, he'll be 92 next week. March 1933 was when he was born.
Right.
And he's been knighted and that type of thing. But Maurice Joseph Micklewhite, not Michael Caine, if you're wondering.
Why didn't he think Micklewhite would sell? Was it too long for the posters? He was like, Caine, no more than 5 letters.
Yep. So, anyway, that's the Brian Kane story. And just to back over the Tav Singh one last time, if you want to get involved, the easiest way, just get in touch with me. You can do all sorts of things, or just call me. And how do you find my number? It's everywhere. So, or find me on any of the social media platforms. DM me, find Tuvs, info@finalwordcricket.com to email him. Either way, it's a straightforward process, and I will literally get the tabs to speak to you.
I'd say refine that process and say email info@finalwordcricket, because that is the point of that address, is for people to get in touch with us. Why don't we reduce that funnel? Why don't you use the method that is designed for that purpose?
Because in this particular instance, that would require Tuvs to get in touch with me, and then I would have to go.
He will. Yes.
So
he will forward that email.
The key thing is that I want to help.
You also have an email, Adam. You also have a Final Word email.
I do.
That's just your name.
Adam at
finalwordcricket.com.
But the wider point,
we set that up for you. So why don't you use it?
I do use it. But my bigger picture here is that let's cut out all the in-betweeny bits. Let's get you signed up today.
Yeah.
Brian Arcane. And our wider Final Word audience, which continues to grow on Patreon, which we're thrilled about. You lose a few at the end of a month because the credit cards, like that thing where your credit card's expiring that month and thus. So, you lose a few, you gain a few. But we're on our surge to 1,009. So
it's like that. It's the bit they stuck in at the end of one of the Star Wars movies when dead Yoda and dead Alec Guinness and dead somebody else are all waving at the end as they disappear. It's like that. You lose the ghosts of patrons past, and then some of them reanimate because they fix up their credit card and they come back. And it's I don't know. I suppose it's like Alec Guinness did that, didn't he? Came back. Whatever his name was. And
we're always grateful when people make that decision. Last note on our community, to everybody who's affected by Tropical Cyclone Alfred in Brisbane, it sounds like the news reports have gotten dramatically worse in the last hour or two. So not their first rodeo. I remember well being in Queensland for Cyclone Yazi in 2011 and how scary that was for as people not knowing what would happen when they woke up the next day and the carnage that ended up hitting northern Queensland. But yeah, mindful that there'll be people listening to this who won't know what they're doing over the next few days. So all the best. Hopefully things go as well as they can, and the worst of the cyclone misses the peak of the population centres.
Yes, it's Champions Trophy time. You're going to be hearing this episode after the Australia-India semi-final has finished. It's actually just started. We're just keeping an eye on it while we record, so we don't know what's going to happen in it. We won't talk about that because there will have already been a daily show on it by the people whose job it is to watch that so that we can do this. But it will have happened. It will be over.
Or we could. We've done this before, Geoff. We've narrated games of cricket live on the pod, which have had dailies between times. I can tell you that Australia is 72 for 2. I can tell you that Cooper Connolly made a 9-ball duck, and that Travis Head will not be, what do they say, fathering India or whatever it is today. He made 39 from 33. Chakravarti, the spinner, picked up him.
He's been good. He's been good.
Yeah, he has. And they've got Sanger in the team as well. So they made that change to bring Tanveer Sanger in, replacing Spencer Johnson. He swung the ball around corners in his last start, but I suppose they wanted to have the extra spin at Dubai Sports City.
Dubai.
But yeah, I'll give you a periodic score update as we work our way through this chat. Who's to know?
Sure. Weird stuff, still weird. I know we talked about it last week, and I don't propose to talk about it at any great length, but extremely weird that both Australia and South Africa had to fly to Dubai in case one of them was going to play India, which one of them was. They just didn't know which one. And then South Africa had to fly back to Pakistan because it wasn't them. So they arrived later. They arrived after Australia and then had to leave and fly back so that they can play tomorrow. It's just not a normal sport, is it?
Look, it is bonkers. Let's not spend 20 minutes on it because we did do quite a bit in Sydney when we were sat next to each other a fortnight ago. But I mean, Steve Smith talking about we guessed right about flying to Dubai. This shouldn't be down to guesswork. It's an international cricket tournament. South Africa saying we've taken it in our stride and all that type of language. They shouldn't need to take in their stride flying twice within 12 hours or whatever it was by the time they got to Dubai and had to turn around again. This is not normal. This is not.
No.
This is boiling frog stuff, right? Because we're so conditioned to it. Because we're so, I guess, shrugging of shoulders about the way that the international game is governed. And that's not to discount the complexity of the India-Pakistan relationship. We all know that. That is the enormous caveat in all of this, but let's not kid ourselves about what is really going on here either. So, and this whole idea that, well, they were only short flights, so it doesn't matter. Do these people not travel? How annoying it is going to the airport and having to go through the travel day process. There's a reason why there are travel days built into schedules, and how this wasn't the second semi-final. Well, we know why it wasn't the second semi-final, because India would prefer to have the longer break before the decider, right? So it is all fundamentally geared this way. I think that we saw in 2023 at the pointy end of the tournament, excellent reporting from Lawrence Booth about what happened with the pitch for the India-New Zealand semi-final. And there was similarly excellent reporting from Daniel Cherney, who was there late at Ahmedabad the night before the final when one end of the pitch had the shit rolled out of it to kill it. And there's more of that in the book we wrote with Glenn Maxwell last year going into this. So, this is not anyone's first rodeo. I think we're just so conditioned to it, Geoff, that we're like, oh, well, here we go again. But it still deserves scrutiny on the way through.
Yeah. I found it odd. There was a little mention during the week that Mitchell Starc said that he'd had an ankle niggle, but he also, the quote was, personal views were a factor in deciding to opt out of the Champions Trophy. And I didn't see any follow-up to that. There was no clarity about what that was. I was trying to decode what that meant because, it didn't seem Afghanistan related because he has played Afghanistan before. So I wasn't sure if that would be it. I wasn't sure if it was Pakistan related because he did tour Pakistan for the Test series in 2022. Wasn't sure if it was about the split tournament thing. I don't know. Did you get any read on that?
I know that some of the Australians weren't chuffed with the arrangements when they got to Pakistan a few weeks ago. It might relate to like preemptively feeling as though there'd be very strict security conditions with them being there and the challenges that anyone would experience in that situation. But that's purely speculative. I'm not sure. But I saw those comments as well. At the time, Cricket Australia were quite forceful about don't get into this. So I'm sort of feel reluctant to do any more than that because there might be stuff going on that we have absolutely no idea about in his personal life. But if it is sort of cricket related, then and there is the ankle.
But if you said personal views and then didn't follow it up, that's the odd thing is to tease that, to sort of float that there was something beyond just fitness. There was some decision to not want to go. It seems an odd thing that nobody did follow it up.
Well, it's affected Australia in a tournament not having Starc there, of course. I mean, we said the other day that it may well be that he's Australia's greatest ever white ball bowler, and they've got a most experienced attack, as Andrew Fidel Fernando pointed out yesterday. India's top three have 81 hundreds between them. Australia's three seamers have fewer than 20 caps between them. So that contrast is stark, and Starc himself would have played a role in all of that. The only other thing I'd add on this is that, the cricket gods can get you with this stuff. When things are too slanted in one's favour in a sporting contest, as it was in 23 and so on with India, there is I guess how I'd put it is there is an enormous amount of expectation and therefore pressure on India to complete the job. And that is something that there's that graphic doing the rounds at the moment about India having been by far the most successful ICC team in the last 14 years in terms of win-loss ratio. Yes, that is absolutely true, but they've also failed at 50-over World Cups consistently and indeed at the 17 Champions Trophies. So it's not all about wins and losses at major tournaments. It's about how you perform under the microscope, and we'll see how this semi-final and the final plays out in the coming days
World
on that
Cup
front.
In 2014 as well, they lost that final.
Yeah, and they, of course, win last year in a thriller, and that might be what changes everything, getting over the line against South Africa when they looked like they were shot in that final. It might all turn around. They might win the final by an innings on Sunday, and good luck to them if they do. But, that's all part of this Champions Trophy conversation, which continues on our daily shows. Geoff, just wanted to say in relation to our daily shows as well that we thank the team that's worked with us on this. We've had McInnes Scotch whiskey with us throughout the course of this. I guess it's been the last 3 weeks since the tournament started. It feels like a long time. But it's been great having a new partner working with us. Just one passing point here. I think we said in our first conversation that you could pay in the search bar. That's actually not how it works. You put the code in by emailing sales@mckinneswhiskey.com, which is in our show notes. But in case you're not a daily show listener and you only listen to the long shows, sales@mckinneswhiskey.com. Click it through in the show notes, and the code's there as well. And as Cam, or I should say Cameron Ponsonby, he's done a nice rebrand there, said astutely the other day, it would be a great birthday gift for somebody. And with the returns they're enjoying at the moment at McInnes Whiskey, it's a clever, shrewd investment. So do consider that, and great to have them part of our Final Word universe.
Jos Buttler, no longer England captain. I mean, I think what surprised me most was the amount of conversation about whether this would happen. I mean, it should have happened so long ago. The writing's been more than on the wall. It's been a street art mural of Jos Buttler resigning, on the side of a skyscraper for years. He's never seemed happy or comfortable in the job. He's never seemed to be enjoying himself. The results have been terrible for a long time. Like, he got a remarkably long rope in the end, and then here they are with another dismal performance in 50 over cricket in a format that their players never play. And he has finally coughed it up. It was Matthew Mott who copped it previously but the fact that they left Buttler in the job seemed regressive, and it seemed like it wasn't, there was no dynamism behind that decision making at the time. It felt stagnant at the time. He seemed stagnant as a player for England. He's had dominant IPL periods, but hasn't been able to produce a whole lot in the way of runs for England and playing with that freedom. Hopefully he can do that. He can keep playing for England and get that sort of that aggression, that fuck it written on the bat handle sort of style of play back. But it seems it's so far too late to have actually made that move.
There's a lesson with teams that have continued success over a long stretch of time. They find a way to regenerate quite a lot, and this England team struggled with that for a period of time. They danced with the one that brung them, and I understand the instinct of that. Australia have Dust were the one that brung them to, and they've been able to do it across the formats. But with England, it felt like for Buttler, it was more a symbol. It was more of a symbol about how wedded they were to their previous generation and that World Cup win, that famous World Cup win of 2019. And I don't want to brush over the 2022 World Cup win either. Buttler is a World Cup winning captain. And that was 3 years ago. Yep, 2.5 years ago. But that was significant. That was a really tough tournament where conditions didn't suit a lot of the time with rain, that rained out game against Australia. And like they had to win a really tough game. They lost to Ireland early in the tournament. That's spot on. The
rain affected one.
Yeah, the rain affected game there, which they probably would have won if not for the rain at the point of the game where the rain came down and Duckworth-Lewis was against them. Having to win a tough chase against Sri Lanka on a used pitch and then getting the job done at the MCG against Pakistan. That's all very commendable, and Buttler was in charge of that. So I don't want history to miss that, but it did feel like after the 23 one-day World Cup, or indeed the 24 T20 World Cup, that there'd be a transition, and there wasn't. So where are they now? Right, well, they're Harry Brook or they're Harry Brook out of the crew who's there, and Rob Key's doing a presser at Lord's on Thursday, which feels, Geoff, like it's going to be quite a big event. I got the media alert yesterday, and it's like all-ins for broadcast and, a round table for the print. Like, it's a big day of Rob Key answering all the questions, and to his immense credit, Key does that. When they play poorly, Key goes and takes all the bullets, and I guess that's his job. So there's the playful suggestions of who might replace Jos. I liked Cameron's suggestion of Treaders. Get James Treadwell back out to lead England again. Alex Bowden had some.
How old is he now? 55, Treaders?
He must be playing in that team, that Masters comp at the moment.
Yeah.
He looks like he's
I'm pretty sure he did. I think he played in the quote-unquote Legends team maybe a year or two ago. He might have been in the road safety, yeah.
I feel like he's a road safety veteran. But Alex Bowden had some fun with it, saying, apparently Rocky Flintoff is like, you can place money on Rocky Flintoff being the next one-day captain of England, which is mental. But anyway, Adil Rashid, is someone who never gets talked about and so on. But then Brendan McCullum's advancing the idea. Well, rather, he's accepting that 3 captains might be the go. So back to that era where it was Strauss, Cook and Broad leading the 3 sides for a couple of years there in the early days of 3-format international cricket. So I doubt it would happen.
Bring it on. I say being England's one-day only captain,
Yeah.
I mean, and Rohit Sharma could have this job for India pretty soon. He's already quit T20s if he bailed out of Tests. If you were the 50-over only captain, it would be like what Vic Marks told us about in one of our early interviews about being the columnist for The Observer, which was the Sunday newspaper. He only had to write once a week, come out on an Ashes tour, be out in Australia for 12 weeks wandering around the country and writing one column for a Sunday, and then spend the rest of your time driving the Great Ocean Road and having a nice old time. They play about 6 ODIs a year, England. So you'd have to have a national contract. If you were one-day captain, you'd have to have a central contract. You'd barely ever play. You'd rock up, you'd play 3 games against Ireland in September, and then you'd play 3 in South Africa or something in at the start of December, and that'd be your lot for the year. Get your contract, cash it in, and chill out.
Yeah, let's tease that out. If they wanted to go to a player who isn't in the T20 thinking and not in the Test thinking, well, there's 2 really. There's Sam Billings, who's been a guest on the show before, clearly a smart guy, but not in the team at the moment. Or James Vince. Now, David Gower was advancing this idea on the BBC yesterday on radio. This would be really interesting because remember that James Vince has stepped away from 4-day cricket with Hampshire in order to provide himself maximum flexibility to play T20 cricket around the world. But if you're the England one-day captain, you're right, you'd need a central contract, I'd imagine, but you'd have enough flexibility to play in all of those tournaments due to the scarcity of bilateral one-day cricket. So maybe this just works. Maybe James Vince, who's got a lot of experience captaining his county, quite a bit of experience playing for England, going back the better part of a decade. So it's a creative
great
solution.
Pedigree. He played in all the games that England lost in the 2019 World Cup, and then they started winning as soon as he got dropped. So that's good.
But he was part of that squad, and he did.
He's got a medal.
And he was out there in the field when they won it as well. He was the sub-fielder for Mark Wood. And I only say that because there is a link back to having been part of a very successful England team in the periphery of that at the time. As you say, played a couple of games, but was never really in the best 11. But yeah, I don't think it's wild. especially given, what was it? They played half as many one-dayers between 19 and 23 than what they played between 15 and 19, and it'll probably be half again between now and the next 50 over World Cup, as you point out before, a handful of games. So, yeah, James Vince for the England captaincy isn't bonkers. And you know, there are obviously wider questions about the England squad, but that's the first big decision they have to make.
Mm-hmm. Matt Kuhnemann, he's got the tick. He's been to UWA, as people insist that we must call it, the University of Western Australia, as some others call it, or the University of WA, as we, for intellectual property reasons, called it on our commemorative T-shirt. I got my action tested at the University of WA. Well, Kuhnemann, he went there spiritually. He didn't go there physically or literally because the testing centre is elsewhere now, but he went there in terms of, you know, like going to purgatory, being sent down to Bedlam, things like that. He went there in the spirit of the thing. He got tested and he's all good. He's not even pushing the 15 degrees. He was under 10 degrees for most of the deliveries that he was tested at. There's apparently a bit of an optical illusion thing to the piece. There's that aspect that affects things, which is often the case with bowlers who do look bendy, that there is something else going on there because, you know, who knew people aren't very good at understanding how things move in really fast motion. You ever see those old paintings of horses running, and they're always running with like their front legs and their back legs out? They're like splayed out. Their front legs are in front of them and their back legs are behind them, and it looks like they're going hurrah as they jump over a stile or something like that. People didn't know that horses didn't run like that until they invented fast flash photography, because it was only at that point that they could take fast frame pictures that showed that the legs actually sort of come in under the horse or a dog or whatever it is and sort of meet underneath it, and that's because of the way that they generate pace. So if you think that you can watch someone bowling and be like 100% definitely a chucker, you can't. You do need the tech to be able to figure that out.
Yeah, they painted horses the way that of that photograph of Victor Trumper all those years ago, with all the limbs splayed as far as they can be. And on that, before we get into the proper conversation here, get that man a T-shirt. Lots of people have said to us that we should get Matt Kuhnemann the I got my action tested at the University of WA shirt, and maybe we can. Like, I've interviewed Matt a couple of times. He seems like a pretty easygoing guy. I wouldn't say I know him well enough to text him and check, but someone might, because he did get his action tested and he has been cleared, and good on him for it. So, yeah, most balls reportedly, News Corp had this story, were less than 10 degrees as opposed to percent, you know, like 360 degrees, 100%. So the margin for error there is more, like, you know, and I only say that because it doesn't take much to move from, say, 9 degrees to 15 degrees. It would take more to move from 9% to 15%. Anyway, so he's still close to the mark. So, and that's okay. This could have been a massive problem for Kuhnemann leading up to India in 2027 and the perception for the rest of his career. But as you point out, there's that optical illusion thing going on, as is often the case. This has been Ashwin's contention from the start on YouTube, saying that he thinks that this is another bowler like him who has been seen as having a suspect action, but just has that hyperextension thing going on, and that seems to be the finding here. As it was with Murali all those years ago, hasn't stopped absolute fuckwits online saying this was a Sri Lankan conspiracy to get back at Australia for the Murali stuff in the 90s, which is mental. And I understand why. The fact that it's Joel Wilson who's there, and again, according to reports, Joel Wilson was the umpire who was most strident about getting Kuhnemann tested. But, I mean, it's a team. Ultimately, the match officials, it couldn't have just been Joe on a flyer. There had to be enough support from the other match officials to get this over the line. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had their names put to it initially as a group. That's the first thing to say. And there isn't a perfect process. I understand where people are like, well, how can you play X games of professional cricket and never have any issues before this point? But if you're preemptively testing, that's going to cause trouble of itself, unless it becomes standardized that every finger spinner gets tested, I don't know, annually or something like that. That could be a solution, albeit a very cumbersome one. But if you're just plucking random spinners out from, well, not random, but you're plucking out spinners who you got a gut feel might have a bit of a bendy arm to take them to UWA once a year, that's going to have its own challenges for those bowlers and the perception of those bowlers. So, yeah, it's imperfect. It's not pretty, but he's now got that green light. He can now crack on, and that's not a bad thing to have his ticket ticked or punched saying, I have a legal action at this point of his career. will help him in the long term, as uncomfortable as the last fortnight has been. And that's the last thing. It's all been cleared up in a fortnight. This has not dragged out over months. It's all been dealt with in a very short space of time.
So the idea that this is somehow somebody getting their back for Murali, I'm like, well, that would make sense if Kuhnemann was hounded, demonised and pilloried for year after year after year, including by the Sri Lankan Prime Minister and like other members of Parliament and that sort of thing. The comparison doesn't stack up. But it could also, it could be a helpful thing for a bowler. It could be a bit like an umpire saying you're getting close to the front line there. It could be saying, why don't we have a look at you now to make sure that you don't continue to drift in this direction. So that might be something that actually ends up being to his advantage.
I think so. Like, this is the bigger picture thing, right? But I think that, like, if you accept that something's imperfect, it's a darn sight better than, as you say, Ross Emerson or Daryl Hare deciding at that juncture that someone is going to be no-balled in that incredibly horrible setting. And I go back to what I said about Ian Metcalfe a couple of weeks ago and how I think that's led towards it being a bit of a psychodrama in Australia for over half a century, this particular topic. But yeah, good on him for getting through that rigorous interrogation, over 30 cameras, making him bowl in silence. I mean, there's a lot going on there. So that'll speak to his character as well. Geoff, we are due for our first break on the show.
Bit of Nerd Pledge after the break, making its comeback.
Nerd Pledge. We've got the Dean Jones Cup final. We've got some news about the County Championship Australians in there, the CA board, the WPL. What isn't there on the Final Word Weekly?